Good morning, Sean here from Mountains Garage. This is video number 2 of our short series of assembling a race Turbo 400 with the trans brake. Last video was case prep, and like a good scout, I went ahead and did everything I said I was going to do. And the last thing I did last night was give it a coat of paint. That's when things went terribly wrong. Let me show you. For the last 6 months or so, I've used this Krylon Color Max. Not in this color. I typically use olive drab. But to great success. As a matter of fact, it's really tough. Let me show you why I think that. I just painted this 9-inch Ford last Friday with their olive drab or olive satin, whatever they call it. And I bolt my bench stand on it, and it hardly even scratches the paint. So tough as nails. So when I came out this morning and took a good look at the flaking, it just starts falling off in sheets. Now, I did nothing different for prep than I always do. I mean, this thing's been washed 3 or 4 times. There's no oil on it. Last thing I did is spray it with brake clean and blow it off and let it sit for a few hours. I mean, there's no reason for this to happen. It's falling off everywhere. I mean, no rhyme or reason. It's not just down there. I've been scraping on that, so unfortunately, that's a setback, but no big deal. I'll just have to scrape and blast it all off, run it through the parts washer. They'll get most of it off. Anything that's not willing to stick. And now the big dilemma is, one, this is a crazy color. It looked better on the on the top of the can than it might in real life. I have 2 cans. Am I silly enough to clean it all up, go through all that effort, and try the other can? Yes, I am. Why not? If it does it the second time, well, I guess I'll be a fool. In the case prep video, I didn't mention I'm going to run a case saver, but it's related to case prep because you have to drive out the pin for the front band. The front band on the Turbo 400 is for engine braking in manual second. You will not install the band. You no longer need the pin because you won't have that feature anymore. No more manual second braking. The pin is right there. You just take a punch and drive it right through the case. This is going to bolt out through that hole, and that'll be the outside. That bolt goes up through the 2-3 accumulator, which is also missing on your trans brake valve body. You won't be running that. The reason for the case saver is there's a large void in the snap ring lugs for the intermediate snap ring inside the case. And with a hard hitting second gear, it wants to push that snap ring right out of the case or break the lugs. So you need to support it. I've seen many varieties of these. This is the first time I've used this particular one. I kind of like the design. We'll see how easy it installs, when you install it, etc. when we put it together. This is a lower gear unit. Out of the case I'm using, which is pretty rare for me, because a lot of times I just strip a whole bunch of transmissions. And the advantage of knowing which case it came out of is I actually have a starting point to set up my roller thrust bearing, because this is my stock spacer and thrust washer. I can measure that. I probably add 10 thousandths to tighten it up and start there when I assemble it. The stock band, if it's in good shape, which this one is, and my drum is in good shape, they claim is better than even the aftermarket Kevlar ones. I have both, but they say if you have a stock band in good shape, continue to use it. This center support is thin, and it takes this threading ring. It installs underneath the center support. You measure this lug right here. The thick one doesn't require it. The thin one does. The cases are all the same. So if you're interchanging parts, it's important to know. There's a lot of parts in this little unit. There's several sets of roller thrust bearings that only face one direction. They're all different. The best way to do it, if you're not familiar with it, I leave it all together on the bench, and I've been doing them for years. And when I'm ready to do it, I'm going to take it over to the bench right now. I'm just going to lay it right out in order. I pull this in and out of the case just like this. I have the tool, and I can lift it vertically. If you don't, I put the case valve body up when I'm stripping the transmission, and I can hold both ends and work it right out in one piece because it wants to slide apart. Nothing holds it together. And there's a roller clutch and whatnot. You can cause some damage. And I'll cover it again when I reinstall it in the case. But when you put it in the case, it should drop right in. Your snap ring should fit right in, and your bolt should thread in by hand. If not, something slid apart when you put it together, because it will allow you to put the snap ring and the bolt in, but then it won't turn. So it tells you, it'll talk to you. It only fits one way. So let's go take it over the bench, and I'll slide it apart and show you what we're going to do to service it. There's also absolutely nothing wrong with referring to the book. If you have any questions about how anything goes together, this book's 25 or 30 bucks. Sometimes you have questions. It's always good to have reference material. All right, so this took all of maybe a minute. So let's lay it out in the order it came apart. If you're changing output shafts, now would be the time to do it. If you're going from four-wheel drive or to a different length, this has the correct 4.5 short output shaft that I want. These are the thrust bearings I talked about. They're all 3-piece. They all have a little hat on them that only face one direction. So you got to be careful where that engages to. So, the reason you take it apart is to inspect all the planetaries. That's where it makes the ratio. You want to check them for 4.5 movement. Anything feels strange. This is a super low mileage transmission. I expected to find nothing, and that's exactly what I found. Truth be told, I seldom find anything wrong back here. These things are tough as nails. Same idea. Check everything over. There's a few bushings you can change. Again, this is super low mileage. They absolutely look perfect. I'll inspect them further, but I doubt I'm going to even change the bushings. What you have to do every time you take the lower unit out is service the center support. One more thing I want to mention about the lower unit and the gear ratio. Stock TH400, 248 first gear. There's many aftermarket ratios available, which is helpful if you have huge horsepower and small tires. That's why the TH400, not only being stronger, is taken over for the Power Glide, because they say there's more room to add more ratios. There's a lot of ratios available. But for what I'm doing, stock is where it's at. They make aftermarket shafts. That one and that one. That's super high horsepower. Glad to know the stuff's available. Not what we're dealing with today. So back to the center support. It has to be serviced every time because this is what applies your intermediate clutch. The transmission I'm putting together from parts, I have aluminum pistons in the forward and direct drum. It's the only other apply piston. This one's steel. I have an aluminum one in stock, and I'm going to change it to an aluminum one. Nothing really wrong with the steel. A lot of people favor the aluminum ones. In the direct and forward drum, when we get there, we'll talk about it more. A lot of people run, well, not a lot, but some run the steel piston with aluminum spacer instead of the tin spacer. Again, opinions vary. But in this case, I have an aluminum piston. I need to change the seals in it anyway, whether I'm using either piston. This has to be serviced. And also, we're going to leave the second ring back off. Install new rings on the other ones. But we're going to be dual feeding the direct clutch. We'll talk about that more. And one of the modifications to do that is to remove the second O-ring, Teflon ring, sealing ring, whatever you want to call it. There's different styles. Leave the second one back off. Some people even machine that. I've done it myself. Machine it flat, but just leaving it off will suffice. I'm going to take that apart. To disassemble, this requires no special tools. The springs are not strong. You just push it down and pop that snap ring out, and it'll pull right out. And easy as that. It's out. Pop a snap ring, plate, three springs and a plastic guide. The actual piston, which has 2 lip seals, which we're going to replace. In this case, along with the piston and the empty center support. So I'm going to clean all this stuff up, find my lip seals and the other piston, and we'll talk. All right, boys and girls, it's time to talk about lip seals. Everything you wanted to know but were afraid to ask. No, I'm just kidding. They always face away. There's a step. This it'll end up being on the same level. So if you turn this around backwards, it would really stick out that it's wrong. These have, same with the inner. It usually faces the oil, where the oil is going to come from, the opening. They all have little part numbers on them. If you go to the kit, it's pretty easy to figure out which ones. It's almost impossible, I'm not saying it is, to put the wrong ones on. But you have the old ones to go by, not that hard. I'm going to lube both O-rings all the way around and the bore. But how do you get it in there without wrecking it? Well, this used to be the standard. The problem with this, you can bend a curve into it, but the curve, it's flatter than the curve, and it's really easy. You're actually going to be working at it from this direction, but it'd be really easy, if you weren't careful, to cut that lip seal. I'm just going to leave that right on the floor. This is actually better if you have nothing else. I did many decades using it this way. Just carefully work your way around. In the case of the center support, in your standard drum, there's a wall here, so you can't get to the outer seal. This one I can just work around with my finger and push that one in. So this is not a hard situation to put the lip seals in. Whoever invented this thing is my hero. This, you literally stick it in, just roll it around, and it falls in. It's awesome. The only thing better than that is to buy the actual J-tools. And now I just, with lube, push it handles the inner one without any stress. I can take my finger and walk around the outside, push it right in. Piece of cake. We're going to talk more about lip seals when we get to the forward and direct drum, which incidentally take the same seal, both the forward and direct. Not as this, but as each other. The return springs, as I showed you, they're not real stiff. I've seen units that have 12. They come stock with 1. This is for the intermediate. It's going to ply really hard. I've taken the accumulator out with my trans-brake valve body. The springs actually return it. I guess they restrict the application some, but the hydraulic pressure overcomes them pretty easy. I think they're more to return the piston. And in this case, I'm going to add 3 more. I have no guidance. It's seldom talked about. I've seen units with all of them. Most only have 1 in each of the 4 holes. So I'm going renegade. I'm just going to put 2, 2, and 2 and put it together. Probably, if you're a Turbo 400 expert, you're not watching my video, you may have an opinion on it. There's lots of stuff to read online. This is what I'm doing. That was easy. We now have a much more robust area. It's going to push on the first steel of the intermediate clutch. I should mention this is also different. The spring retainer, the old one had the plastic guide and just a flat retainer. So I replaced the steel piston, the plastic guide, and the retainer. The snap ring's the same either way. I was still able to push it together by hand and just roll the snap ring in, but it's definitely, well, I guess twice as firm as it was before. And that's my center support. Now, I'm going to clean and inspect and reassemble the entire lower unit. Exactly like I took it apart, it just slides together. Once I get the output shaft reassembled, I like to put it in this fork arrangement I made. I made this to hold the forward drum. When I work on it, you either need a hole in the bench or the input shaft needs to go down between there. And the drum sits on here and allows me to work on the piston and stack the clutches and whatnot. Just a bunch of flat bar welded together, a couple C-clamps. Just so happens my lower unit slides in here also, and I can stack it all up and make it ready to assemble. Not required. I took it apart, just laying on the bench like it is. It'll go back together the same way. No special tools required. Just pay attention to detail. If you get lost, look in the book. And you'll know when it's right, and you'll know when it's wrong. It'll tell you. See you in a minute. I'm halfway through my stack up, and I noticed my Salsa Ring, which is just a hunk of plastic, is kind of beat up. So that required a trip out with a storage box to get another one. No big deal. It's good to have spare parts. Moving on. All right, all stacked up. I put 3 Teflon seals. Yes, the top one's green only because it's what I had. And I put a lot of the green assembly goo on it. The green is pretty thick. It works good here in August when it's 90-something degrees out. The old Vaseline works year-round. The red assembly goo is also good year-round. It's kind of a joke. The green is a little bit stiffer, but it works good. I like to pack it right in the lip seals where the scarf is cut. So when you push it right in, it glues them right in, so you won't have any trouble putting it together. That's my lifting tool. And if in a perfect world, I would be dropping it into the case right now, but as we know, I got to fix my paint. So next video, we'll set up the rear bearing, thrust bearing in the case, and drop it in. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Oh, hold it. I also mark the center support threaded hole, so when I'm lowering this into the case, I can steer it in the right place, because the lugs kind of all look the same when you're going down, and you don't want to dislodge it like I mentioned. It needs to go down through the band and land in its place without knocking it apart, because it wants to fall apart. So that's all.